Head coach Bud Grant and his staff, the job is not to get the Vikings to the top, it's to keep them there. And in 1975, Minnesota stayed tucked at the top by once again dominating their division. In beating the Bears twice, 28-3 in Minnesota and 13-9 in Chicago, the Vikings made it 12 wins in the last 14 games over Chicago. A 25-19 victory in a season split with the Lions brought the Vikings' record to 14 wins in the last 16 games with Detroit. (28-17) and 24-3 victories over the Packers gave the Vikings 5 victories in 6 games against division rivals in 1975. Four of the wins were part of a 10-game season-opening win streak that virtually assured Minnesota of its 7th NFC Central Division title in the last 8 years. In an opening day victory over the 49ers, 27 points and 4 sacks in the first half alone showed the full range of Minnesota muscle. Either unit was capable of winning a game for the Vikings. The offense rolled up an insurmountable 42 points against Cleveland. The defense limited Chicago to 3 points 1 week later. Number 4 and still counting with a win over the Jets. Another big day of offense. Against the Jets, another unit turned in a big play. A blocked punt that resulted in a safety, a key part of Minnesota's 29-21 victory. Next came 3 consecutive interdivisional victories over Detroit, Chicago, and Green Bay as the Vikings stretched their string to 7 in a row and held a 4-game lead in the division. Atlanta fell 38-0. New Orleans 20-7 as the Vikings marched through the South. The San Diego Chargers were the club record 10th straight victim, which also gave the Vikings the longest win streak in the conference. During the streak, Minnesota outscored their opponents by 162 points, an average winning margin of over 16 points. For the season, the Vikings rolled up 377 points, 3rd best in the league, and yielded just 180, finishing best in the league in both rushing and passing yardage allowed. In the end, 10 straight opponents left the field shaking their heads. In just 10 games, the Vikings all but locked up the Central Division crown. The Vikings' win streak would end in Washington, but the true character of a team often comes through as clearly in defeat as in victory. And that character was sorely tested as the Vikings fell behind 21-0. RFK Stadium rocked, but slowly, surely, each Viking drew deeply from Minnesota pride. There could still be victory with an inspired Viking comeback. From the doorstep of defeat, the Vikings had outscored the Redskins 30-3 and led 30-24. Suddenly trailing 31-30 after such a great comeback, a team of character digs deeper and summons yet more heart. The Vikings worked in close enough for a field goal try and summoned a man who has what many consider to be pro football's toughest job. But this time it wasn't to be for Fred Cox, a veteran of so many tense moments. This time his kick was deflected. No good. And the win streak was over. There would be no perfect season for the 1975 Vikings. A small thing, really, in light of the Vikings' impressive array of championships. The key is not to look back at losses, but to look ahead to future successes. That is the job of Bud Grant and his assistant coaches, Jerry Burns, Buzz Mertes, John Michaels, Neil Armstrong, Jocko Nelson, and Buddy Ryan, who replaces Jack Patera, now the head coach of the new Seattle Seahawks. Bud Grant's roster is dotted with up-and-coming young players, with 5-, 6-, and 7-year men in the prime of their careers, and with some remarkable veterans who are traditions in themselves. Men like defensive captain Jim Marshall, number 70, who each year reach back to reclaim past glories. Marshall has started every game the Vikings have played, and his consecutive game streak has now reached 222 games. He has never lost his enthusiasm for the game, and this season, 38-year-old Jim Marshall was merely brilliant once again. Marshall's play is typical of the Viking veterans. They don't get older, they get better. Carl Eller does. In 1964, Eller became Marshall's partner at defensive end. Drafted number 1 that year, he came into the league with something to prove. Eller, like Marshall, is getting up there in years. He was 33 this season, his 12th. Eller, like Marshall, still plays the game with youthful exuberance. The experience that players like Eller add to the Vikings' success story comes forth in the big games. Eller was brilliant in the playoffs, tracking Roger Staubach from sideline to sideline, sacking him 3 times and totaling 8 solo tackles in the game. An example of the more contemporary player now at the height of his career is Alan Page. He is the only defensive player ever named NFL Most Valuable Player. Another Viking number 1 pick in 1967, Page still exhibits the capabilities that have made him one of the greatest defensive tackles to ever play the game. Page of Notre Dame, Eller of Minnesota, Marshall of Ohio State, and Sutherland of Superior State in Wisconsin. Number 69, Doug Sutherland, came out of a small school to make a big name for himself on one of the best defensive lines of all time. Number 75, Bob Lertzema, and yet another number 1 draft pick, Mark Mullaney, came on in special situations. A rookie and a 9-year veteran. Almost a generation apart, yet filling similar roles. Typical of each Viking's willingness to contribute to the Minnesota tradition. Twelve-year veteran Paul Krause was the old master in the secondary. Krause began his career in Washington, where he intercepted 12 passes as a rookie. In 1968, Krause came to the Vikings and continued his knack for being around the ball. 33 years old in 1975, Krause was still the savvy scavenger. 1975, Krause intercepted 10 passes to move into second position on the all-time NFL interception list with 74. Against Detroit, Krause took a handoff from Wally Hilgenberg, who was a co-captain with Krause at Iowa, and scored the third touchdown of his pro career. Later, Hilgenberg said, "I didn't give the ball to Paul because he's faster. I gave it to him because I'm a better blocker." Krause brings the cool of 12 years in pro football to the secondary, playing alongside the young veterans of the defensive backfield. Nate Wright, Terry Brown, who became a starter when Jeff Wright went down with an injury, and Bobby Bryant. Though a 12th round draft pick number 27, Autry Beeman made the roster and fit right in. The Wright brothers, Brown and Bryant. These are the players in their prime who will carry the Viking colors as younger players like Autry Beeman gain playing experience for the day when he too will get his chance as a starter. Another player in his prime is middle linebacker Jeff Seaman, number 50. Just in his 4th season, Seaman is already the complete middle linebacker. He can blitz, cover the pass, and is especially hazardous to a running back's health. In the linebacker corps, the heavy experience comes from the outside positions. Seaman was flanked by 14-year veteran Roy Winston and Wally Hilgenberg, a 12-year pro who still can deliver the Hilgenberg hit. Only Jim Marshall has been a Viking longer than Roy Winston, number 60. These next two plays may seem to be an instant replay, but aren't. Winston and Eller have been manning the left side together for 12 years now and can play the sweep in their sleep. Winston and Hilgenberg are using their experience to help prepare their backup men. One is number 54, Fred McNeil, a savage pursuer. McNeil was the Vikings' #1 draft pick in 1974. The number 2 selection that year was Matt Blair, another linebacker known for his nasty. Like so many young players, Blair made his mark on special teams, a black and blue mark. The foot in Viking football is another youth and experience relationship. The experience of 13-year veteran Fred Cox, who went over the 1,200-point total in 1975. The youth of rookie punter Neil Flabeau, who finished as the conference's 4th-ranking punter and was tied for the NFL lead in coffin corner kicks. The Minnesota special teams are heavily sprinkled with young players, waiting, watching, learning. For even as they are winning, the Vikings are rebuilding. And these players will be ready to step into starting roles when their time comes, keeping the Viking ship on an even keel. One notable veteran is number 41, 11-year pro Dave Osborne. Until this season, he held the Vikings' single-season rushing record. Now, at 33 years of age, Osborne's contribution is special team hustle and a continuing willingness to use the shoulder as a weapon. One skill that all Viking backs must exhibit is pass-catching ability, and it doesn't hurt if they can run after the catch. A quality shown by 1975 number 5 draft pick Robert Miller, number 35, and Brent McClanahan, number 33, who caught 18 passes this year. Ed Marinaro, number 49, hauled in 54 passes in 1975, the 2nd highest total on the team. Passes to swinging backs have become such a big part of the Viking offense that running backs caught 150 passes this season, and Chuck Foreman, number 44, set an NFL record for running backs with 73 catches for nearly 700 yards and 9 touchdowns in 1975. Shorter passes made pass blocking easier for the Minnesota offensive line. Steve Riley, John Ward, Steve Lawson, Charles Goodrum, and Andy Maurer. Ed White, Ron Yeri, and Mick Tingelhoff set Chuck Foreman loose on the first 1,000-yard rushing season in Viking history. Here, Tingelhoff cuts number 52, Jet middle linebacker Steve Reese. Yeri, number 73, seals off the inside. Number 62, Ed White, cleans up the outside, and Chuck Foreman is on his way to 1,070 yards. By the end of the season, Chuck Foreman was closing in on the NFC Triple Crown. On closing day, Foreman wrapped up the receiving and scoring titles, but fell a mere 6 yards short of the rushing championship. He shared the NFL record for touchdowns in a season with Gale Sayers and O.J. Simpson with 22 until Simpson went him one better. Sayers, Simpson, and Foreman, not bad company. So for all that, Chuck Foreman, here's a kiss from Mom.
Here's your mother, honey. Hi. Come kiss your mommy.
Hey, Mom.
Come kiss your Aunt Lulu. Other than a sawtooth. Other than Aunt Lulu. Other than a sawtooth.
Francis Asbury Tarkenton was 35 years old when the new season began. It was his 15th year, and he was on the brink of 2 of the most meaningful passing records in the books. But impersonal statistics are not the measure of this man. From the time he put on a Viking suit in 1961, thrill-a-minute excitement was his watchword. Following a 5-year fling in New York, Tarkenton returned to the Vikings in 1972. The same excitement was still there, and the record books beckoned. Entering the 1975 season, Tarkenton was closing in on all of Johnny Unitas' records, a tribute to his durability and to his excellent receivers. One was tight end Stu Voigt, who had his best season ever with 34 catches in 1975. At wide receiver, Tarkenton could look for Jim Lash, who caught 37 passes and averaged almost 15 yards per catch. At the other wide receiver, Tarkenton found John Gilliam 50 times for over 15 yards a catch and 7 touchdowns. With an excellent crew of receivers, 1975 brought Tarkenton to the doorstep of pro football immortality. He has done it with a style all his own, a style that was not always accepted.
I scrambled, which was a terrible thing for a quarterback to do. How could you not stay in the pocket all the time? Because that's the way a quarterback was supposed to be. And all these things were hard for a lot of people to adjust to. Writers, sportscasters, coaches, so forth. And they couldn't see how this freak could come and play. And so I've somehow defied some of those criticisms and odds, and now people are finally saying that, well, maybe we were wrong. Most quarterbacks that play today are mobile quarterbacks who can run with the football, who can scramble, who can buy time to get more time to pass, and these are the guys that are the most successful in our game now.
By the end of the season, Tarkenton would be the most successful quarterback ever, and he was named 1975's most valuable player.
People didn't want to believe that I could succeed being the type of quarterback or a different quarterback that I was. And I think now they've accepted the fact that, you know, I am not a freak quarterback, that I can read defenses, I can call a game, I do know something about the game, and I can throw the football. And now we're starting to see that people are finally saying, you know, he really is possibly a slight bit above average.
Above average indeed. With every swing of his arm, Tarkenton was closing in on a legend. Against San Diego, Johnny Unitas' career completion record fell on this Tarkenton pass to Ed Marinaro. And as the season wore on, Unitas' career touchdown record, once thought of as unreachable, came into sharp focus in Tarkenton's sights.
You know, talking about that record, I remember about 7 years ago, I was in New York riding on a bus to Yankee Stadium, and Wendell Harris, who was playing with us as defensive back, he was looking at records, and he saw Unitas' touchdown pass record, and he said, you know, what a record that is. He said, nobody's going to come close to that touchdown pass record. And I remember, and I was kind of serious, I said, yeah, I'm going to beat it. And beat it, he did. On the regular season's final weekend, a sugar-coated Saturday in Buffalo, KSTP's Joe McConnell described an historic moment.
Flash wide to the left, Gilliam in the slot to the left. First and goal from the 7. Fran rolls to the right, dumps it out, caught by Foreman, touchdown! Chuck Foreman's 4th touchdown of the day. Fran Tarkenton's record-breaking 291st career touchdown pass.
The Minnesota Viking highlight film is brought to you by J.C. Penney and the First Bank System and its 90 member banks throughout the upper Midwest.